My name is Frank Mitloehner and I'm a professor and air quality specialist in the Department of Animal Science at UC Davis. Now, in contrast to humans, cows have a 4-chambered stomach. And the first one is massive. It's the so-called rumen. It has a volume of 50 gallons, or the volume of your bathtub. The reason why it's so big is because ruminant animals such as cows graze or eat, and what they eat is just pretty much swallowed quickly and then later brought up to be chewed again. A process called chewing the cud or rumination. And it is microbes in the rumen, in that large stomach, that enable the ruminant to digest the food. The process by which plants take CO2, carbon dioxide, out of the air, a process for which they also need sunlight, and then these plants produce carbohydrates and they produce oxygen. That oxygen is then released. So now that plant is being eaten by a cow. And when the cow digests it, a certain portion of that carbon in the plant is released as methane. In contrast to CO2, that methane has a very short lifespan. In fact, it's only in the atmosphere for 10 years. And after 10 years, that methane is converted into CO2 again. What's interesting is that the CO2 that was at the beginning of the story, the amount of CO2 that went into the plants, is the same amount of CO2 that results after methane is converted into CO2 again. So we are not adding in this cow carbon cycle, we are not adding new carbon to the atmosphere. So a livestock cycle of carbon is distinctively different from a fossil fuel related greenhouse gas. Why? Let me explain it to you. Okay, so let's go back to the question of how cows compare to cars. Every time that you've ever driven a vehicle or mowed a lawn or anytime you burn something, you put out CO2 into the atmosphere and all of that is still there. And every time the sun hits those carbon molecules, these carbon molecules heat up, trap the heat, and contribute to global warming. Remember what I said about cows. What they put out in methane has a lifespan of 10 years, CO2 1,000 years. CO2 has one way and one way only, and that's up. Methane stays stable as long as your livestock herd stays stable.